Go ahead.
Thank you. Andrew Walsh. I'm a commercial fisherman. I operate a squid boat that fishes behind the islands. I just want to remind the state that the preliminary analysis that the state has done regarding this issue does not support such a drastic measure. The state should strive to take management decisions based on actual data, especially when such changes will have a significant impact on other user groups. As far as you know, the charts and stuff that you've shown, you're using actual observer data that doesn't show that these problems exist, and you're also taking comments based on wild accusations that are accusing boats of doing things that, for one, I can say are not. The squid fishery, we don't fish at night. Squid are on the bottom during the day. In the daytime, we tow our nets, we catch squid in the daytime. At night, those squid, they come to the surface, they're on the surface. Doesn't matter how long we could tow all night, we're not gonna catch squid. We're not gonna catch anything. If we do, it's gonna be discards, and that's the reason why this fishery doesn't fish at night. Even though in federal waters you're allowed to, it's still common practice not to fish at night. You set out in the morning, you tow all day, and you haul back at night. And when the boats come in, and you can see them from your beaches, boats come in and they go up closer to the beach to stay out of high traffic areas, and they anchor up. It's also to stay out of the winds, especially when you have a northerly wind or a northeast wind or something like that. It could be pretty crappy laying on a door off your stern. It's like being hung up and you're taking seas over your stern. So the boats go up on the beaches at night, common practice, and they lay on their doors. We're sheltered. It's like taking safe harbor, except we're on anchor. The other thing is the boats that you are seeing outside are almost all boats over 72 foot, most of them. I'd say at least 80% of them, 85% to 90%. They're boats that are federally permitted. They do have no state permits whatsoever, at least for Massachusetts. They might in other states. Those are federal squid boats that primarily do target squid. They go all the way up and down the entire coast. That's why some years you barely see any boats back there, and other years it looks like a city back there. It's because those boats are coming from as far away as New Jersey, New York. Some of them are coming from Virginia, Rhode Island. On certain years like this one, the squid happen to come into Massachusetts and Nantucket Sound. This was actually a huge year for squid in this area. But they hardly saw any squid off of New Jersey, New York, and almost nothing at all in Rhode Island also. So the federal boats that are fishing outside 3 miles all followed the squid up here, and that's what you see. Same thing back in '07. I don't know if anybody was looking off the beaches in '07, but there was just as many boats fishing in 2007 behind this islands because there was very little squid off in New York and New Jersey. They just happened to hit up here this year. Last year, there was nothing up here. That's why you probably didn't see any boats and there was hardly any landings. As far as rescinding this regulation, it's not going to stop all those federal boats from coming up and fishing that 3 mile line off your beaches. It's only going to stop the Mass state boats, which I run on a boat that has state permits in Massachusetts. It's a smaller dragger, especially when you compare it to these 100-foot boats that you are seeing back there. And we're coming inside 3 miles legally, and we're fishing in the daytime, not at night. There's really only a handful of boats that do come in and that can legally come in. And if anybody is fishing illegally, say they're coming in during the daytime and they're not state permitted, they can still do so regardless of this regulation being rescinded if they're going to do it illegally. What this is stopping is the handful of boats that are legally permitted to fish in the state of Massachusetts in state waters that are small enough to do so from coming in and legally fishing. And I really just have to oppose this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Good, Pete. Anyone I haven't heard from? Let me.
Yeah. My name's Dave Beaumont, and I do beach fishing charters, and I also write for On the Water magazine. And there's no doubt in my mind the fishing has gone way, way downhill. The only two people that are so far positive for it are people that are making money off of it, you know? And do you guys fish at all?
Sure.
You do. You think the fishing has gotten better in the last 10 years?
Well, fishing for what?
For striped bass, bluefish?
No, but it's got nothing to do with squid.
Well, squid is bait, and so is herring. You take away the bait, you ruin the fishing.
Yeah, but I I look at the dynamics of our fish populations up and
Yeah.
down the coast, and that's what I do for work.
Yeah.
And so I have
And
a different opinion, different understanding than perhaps many people in the room.
Well, people
So
like-
I happen to know that our striped bass populations were enormous, bigger than we've ever seen them in recent history over the past 2 decades. And the reason why we don't have many river herring is probably because the striped bass ate them all. We haven't seen many river
It's not a
herring.
question the fishing here has gone way downhill. Way, way,
Yeah,
way
and
downhill.
we haven't had any good reproduction of striped bass coming out of the Chesapeake
why
for about
take the
8
food?
years. Excuse me?
Then, maybe control some of the food that's been taken. The Menhaden boats, which were not around here, we don't get the big
Yeah, it's
Menhaden.
not, again,
Well-
you're kind of swaying off.
Yeah, well, I'm
the-
just saying it's the bait that makes the
But
fish
I
grow
can't
big.
sit here and listen to people try to convince others about things that aren't true.
okay, so the
There's the
fishing's
truth and there's the untruth.
Okay.
And so I'm here, I'm the most unbiased person in the room. I can assure you, I hold no permits. I'm not a squid fisherman. I have no
But your
specific
job
agenda.
is based on it, so you do have something to do with it.
Actually, my job is not based on my performance, unfortunately, but,
I didn't say
so let's
All right, fine.
let's keep it to the agenda.
Whatever.
Thank you.
Hi.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Virginia Andrews. I come from generations of fishing family, though I haven't aligned myself in about 20 years. I can speak to the past fecundity of the herring fishery because I went when I was about maybe 8 with my father to seine herring for lobster bait, and one scoop and we would have a skiff full. And that hasn't been the case for quite a long time. And I know that we did key him out at one point as the alewife, but I've also heard people who were very knowledgeable say that the few fish that we're seeing now, vastly less than we used to, were the bluebacks. So I'm not even sure that we're looking at the same species. And I can't speak to the squid. I love calamari, but I don't want to be the one to eat the last one. Just as a birder, we can say that in the past, in the days of the market hunting for birds, there was a very poor understanding of the dynamics of very abundant populations and what the critical mass was. And as you know, birds and fish are related somewhat evolutionarily. It's not, I'm not saying it's the same thing at all, but I think the fisheries data can be hard to collect. You're looking at catches, you're looking at actual data, but that isn't necessarily going to save the fishery because we've lost others in the past, and I think the ammunition. So, now that it's very rare to see any, the time to protect things is while they are abundant, because if you go too far, then you'll never get them back.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
I could just make a comment. The gentleman who owns the dragger, who's from Massachusetts, I appreciate him standing up in front of this, what could be contrived as a hostile crowd and saying his piece. I just want to make one point, is that what he said kind of rang out to me, and it's that most of these boats are from all over the coast, and they are allowed to fish in federal waters. And we're not trying to kick them out of federal waters. We're talking about state waters, 3 miles and out. And you had a system in place that allowed him to come in here and fish prior to this change with an LOI. And I don't want to tell somebody who lives in the state that he can't fish in here. If you've got 3 or 4 or 5 draggers that are mass draggers and they want to fish in here, and you want to issue them an LOI, I'm sure some of the people in the room aren't going to agree with me. I'm not going to say don't do that. What I'm talking about right now is the 40-plus draggers that come up and down the coast that are right now can come right into the beach if they want. Let's keep them out in the federal waters. Let the federal guys deal with those guys, and let's keep our waters for our fishermen.
Okay. Go ahead, the gentleman in the back of the room, come on up. Could you come up closer? Because we'll have trouble hearing you.
You have bass boats who are,
Yeah, go ahead, go up to the mic.
my name's Jonas Baker. I do have some federal fishing permits that I do fish, mainly tuna, but if the guys who are fishing for squid inside 3 miles and are permitted, shouldn't they be on VMS so that you know that they are inside? And the federal guys, if they're stepping inside, you could almost say, hey, here are the permits. You guys are on VMS. We know you're fishing in here. You guys are the only guys fishing in here. You take the federal guys who are coming in and you're saying that the data, because they're just reporting it on paper, it doesn't really matter because they can step inside, step back outside. You know, you're not really getting consistent, you know, or the VMS doesn't match the trip report. So what I'm saying is if you matched the VMS to the trip report and said, yes, you're definitely fishing these
Sure.
waters, it's this vessel, you were in there for this amount of time, you caught this amount of tonnage.
Yeah,
You kind of-
it's a great point, and for those folks who don't know, VMS is Vessel Monitoring Systems. It's a GPS system for tracking where vessels are in real time, and some federally permitted vessels are mandated or required to have a VMS unit on board.
No, that's kind of where I'm going with the whole story.
And so
then-
state vessels are not.
I understand.
And
And,
so-
guess what I'm saying is if you really want to get a hold of it here, you know, there's like, I commercially tuna fish. I need XYZ from the Coast Guard, you know, this, life preserves. That's part of the drill.
Right,
It's part of
right.
running a business. You want to make money at it, it costs money to run a business. So
Right.
get the VMS, get all, you know, and I'm just trying to come
I
to a-
agree with you.
Trying to come to a middle ground here.
I agree
you
with
don't want to
you
steal
that-
somebody's livelihood because he's fishing inside, he's legal. But if it's, you know, these other boats that you got a whole fleet that says, hey, there's no squid in Jersey, let's go to Mass.
Right.
Oh, nobody's looking, step inside, you know. You don't only need to come in half a mile, you know, wipe out 10 ton, step right out. Oh, no, trip report, you know, it's 6 miles offshore. So that's all
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, you know, and
That's common sense. I mean, that's where it's at.
you're exactly right, but, you know, what's common sense these days?
But
It's not so
I
common,
That's
but
the way to make money.
I agree with you that VMS
okay.
is an incredibly powerful tool that could be very helpful in managing our fisheries more effectively.
and if it's, you know, if there are only 10 boats in Mass doing it, somehow
It's been
work this
extremely
out.
difficult for fisheries managers to implement VMS as a mandate across the board. We don't have it.
No, yeah.
And
Make it a requirement of the LOI?
yeah, there's certain ways we can do that for certain fisheries, but unfortunately, the federal VMS is not even available to state fisheries managers. It was created as a law enforcement tool, and even though we've gone through every step, including having our Attorney General write to demonstrate that it's at the highest level of enforcement for us, we could only get it. It's when we do get VMS information, it's a 3-month lag. So you need it real time, and in this day and age, you can see how valuable that would be for us to judge fishery performance, compliance, where the action is.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, when we have our tuna season, I get boarded 3 times in a week. I'm like, you guys just boarded me. They're like, what's the number? I said, you know, it doesn't go into the huge database. They only downloaded that. I mean, I get all that. But you're getting boarded 3 times tuna fishing, and then, you know, you're only 3 miles off the beach here, but some guy in his 17-foot whaler is out, you know, at the vortex, and he's getting boarded by the Coast Guard. It's like, it's not that, you
Yeah.
know, and that's all I'm saying is that
It's a good point.
you're going to have to kind of push a little if you guys want to keep the fishery going, in my opinion. Enforcement. We get enforced in other fisheries, enforce it in that fishery. Somehow you're going to come to a middle ground, that's all.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the point, and I think it's consistent with yours that, you know, maybe there's a way to limit this effort and
Well,
control it and
could-
understand it better.
Can you
I
bring the
understand.
map up of the closed area? Because I want to make one, I hate to, there's a key issue here that hasn't been brought up, and I want to make sure it gets talked about. And it's that section between the Vineyard and Nantucket, Muskegon Channel. That is the funnel into Nantucket Sound. These squid come in there. Now, if the draggers stay outside the 3-mile island, a 3-mile line, the depth out there is roughly 80 feet to 120 feet. As that squid comes up from the south, that funnel acts like a natural fish weir. It funnels everything together. If you allow these draggers in close, right up to Muskegon Channel, you got 65 feet of water. They can just picket line that funnel, that opening of that fish weir. And that's why your numbers are so big, because they were able to go in there this year and troll up and down that corridor where all these squid are funneling into the sound to spawn, and they're catching them before they even get a chance to spawn. If they stay outside of 3 miles, they're still going to catch their squid, but some of them are actually going to have a chance to get through.
And I'm just curious, we all know that those fish are headed into the sound to spawn. The way it used to be set up, we sort of had a rolling closure set up where June 9th, everybody was in the sound, after that, nobody fished for them. And the boats that were outside stayed outside 10 to 20 miles. So there was sort of a rolling closure. The guys switched over inside the sound to, fluke fishing. They'd still be catching some squid, and they'd make comment about it, which was nice. We knew some X amount of squid were getting in to spawn and then exiting out. And we'd have that by testimony of the guys that say, oh, look at these squiddos all, in the summer, at the end of the summer. We knew the spawn was effective, it was taking place. And the reason why this got so outraged was because this year, it was basically a no-show event, like has been echoed before. We didn't see the squid coming out through the east side, and we didn't see the squiddos. Something that nobody's really brought up, and I believe it's still some discussion to go, is if you take a look at essential fish habitat. I know we talked about this, and it was mentioned that, well, it's just shifting sand, so it doesn't really matter out there. But there's a reason why those fish are there. The squid are coming through, the bass, the bluefish, they all know it. So they're going to head them off at the pass. And as far as this, we've heard comment about clean fishery. I mean, I can give testimony. We do the dive work around here also on a lot of jobs, draggers that get nets in the wheels. We got a call last summer. It was right in the middle of June. Somebody had a net in the wheel right off Tuckanuck. I was on a fishing charter. I couldn't go, so my 2 colleagues went. I said, how'd it go? He said, oh, net in the wheel, typical. Guy was like 2 miles off of Tuckanuck. And we didn't know at that point in time, middle of June, that it was legal. I said, they must have drifted in there. So he said, well, we got the net out of the wheel. And they both were astonished by the cod end. The cod end was on the bottom. They were shallow enough water. They went down and took a look at it. I said, well, what was in it? And both of them the same story. There was about 30% squid and 70% black sea bass, scup, fluke, tautog, all kinds of things. So let's take our heads out of the sand that it's inherent in the gear type. If you're going to use a 2-inch mesh, we've seen it all through the herring fishery, that bycatch is inherent. There's no way. Everything is there to eat these squid, and I wish there was a way to just fish for clean squid. But everything at all times of day, night, daytime, they're in there eating them. So I'd like to hear some discussion about the bottom out there, as far as tearing it up, whatever's left. I mean, I brought this up before, that there used to be mussel beds out there, weed patches, and it had essential fish habitat written all over it. And now, if you let's look at it again. In some parts of this country, there is no dragging the bottom. If it's considered to be essential fish habitat, they want to keep it that way. The Madison-Stevens Act says you got to protect the essential fish habitat. So it's either the benthic community, it's the shifting sand, which is a great location for sand eels. They burrow right in there. But the place has got magic. And to continue to allow that place to get beat up, as Ginger was saying, we don't want to see the end. It's in sight right now. If you allow this pressure to keep happening, we will see the end in sight. Then you guys will be at the wheel when it happens. So.
Okay. Good.
Again, Tobias Smith, I just wanted to reach out and say, whatever we can do at the federal level, we're interested in pursuing that as well. It sounds like a big aspect of this is boats coming into federal waters as well, and we're very we're all interested, and we do see our vice president here, and we have some members that are higher up in the world, and we have the ability to reach out for them. I'm sure someone in this room mows lawns or cuts grass for one of them, so I'm sure we can reach out, and we'd love to be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to counter what Pete had to say there in defense of dragger. I am a dragger.
Just give your name so we can...
Yeah, my name's Willis Blount. I own the fishing vessel Ruthie B. It's the last large dragger out of here. And one thing of interest to me is when I began fishing, there was beginning to be some grass in the Sound. There was a little bit of grass was just starting to grow in the shoals. Georges Banks had no grass or algae or anything on the bottom at all. So when you got done towing, and this would have been maybe the early 70s on Georges Banks, there was nothing. All that was in the net was just a little fish slime. We would tow our nets maybe, we get done fishing, we'd tow the net maybe for 15 minutes afterwards, get rid of the fish slime, and everything was gone. That's all changed now. Now there is a terrible weed problem in Nantucket Sound, outside, everywhere. Even Georges Banks now is invasive species of algae have grown. Everything has changed. The bottom has changed, as you're well aware of it. And I talked to the old timers here because dragging, just like the whaling, started here and moved to New Bedford. And so I talked to some of the old timers who were here and asked them, I said, what was the dragging like back in the 20s and 30s and stuff like that? And they said, well, everywhere we went, there was no grass at all. There was nothing. I asked them about the grass. The only thing in Sound, once in a while, there was some eelgrass. That was it. There was no other algae growing in the area at all. And so the nets were always clean when they came back. And so, the concept that dragging a net over the bottom, I don't think is necessarily viewed by people like Jacques Cousteau as just destroying the bottom. I don't think that's necessarily true, because the bottom is not like our yard or like a forest or something like that. It was just smooth sand most of the time. And different species of fish, some fish like a muddy bottom, some fish like a sandy and hard gravel bottom. And the fish that like the gravel and the sand have not done well, because I believe it's not the draggers that are the problem, it's the invasive, it's the phosphates and the nitrates and stuff like that have gone into the harbor, into this water that has changed the bottom. And it's turned from being hard sand and gravel in a lot of places to mud. And places like offshore, even 100 fathoms, even 10, 15 years ago, I'd hang up on rocks. Now, there's no rocks there. They're buried in the mud that's come from the pollution from the land. So, but, the concept that dragging a net over the bottom destroys the bottom, I don't think that's true. And that's been my personal experience over a lot of years.
Do you fish for squid out there?
No, Paul, I've pretty much stayed with groundfish, and whatever you do here today will not affect me. I'm 77 feet. I can't. I'm just too big to that, and I've just stayed with the groundfish, and I haven't gone into the small. I did it a long time ago on the small bass fishery, but not recently. I've pretty much just stayed in ground fishing. So, okay. But whatever's done here won't hurt me. But I agree. I think that your big problem is the non-Massachusetts offshore big boats. I mean, I have done it. I know, and I'm in the industry, and I'm aware of what's going on. And your problem as has been identified is the non-Massachusetts big boats, primarily from the south.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is John O'Connor. I was wondering, you made a comment about the Chesapeake Bay. I was wondering what the state attributes the decline of striped bass and bluefish, if it's not available.
Why don't we hold off the striped? We're going to actually jump to striped bass in a few minutes, so why don't we hold that off? I'm sorry, but let's continue the south of the island discussion. Is there anyone else? I've got a really good sense of where most of the room is on the issue, and so unless there's nothing new, I would like to jump to the striped bass issue, because I think we have 8 agenda items that we've got to cover today. It's a full agenda. Go ahead, sir.
Can we go back to that chart with the one more, I think? Keep a little more, the map on. Right there. The guys are talking about the funnel of the squid.
Yeah.
The state line runs, you can see it there, it runs down south of the Hooter Buoy. And correct me if I'm wrong, the fellow here, those guys don't tow up inside the Hooter Buoy, because the shoals in south of Muskeget, the shoals run down for quite a ways south of the islands. I've never seen a dragger up inside the Hooter Buoy. I mean, south of the Vineyard, yeah, they come up inside there because they can tow there, in south of Nantucket they can, but
I saw one there last spring,
there was a boat up there.
in there all day long.
Oh yeah, was he?
Inside.
Was it a big boat?
Green on that, in between the Hooter Buoy and Muskeget.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, all day long. The day that I was down there, that's just one day.
yeah.
was he squidding?
Yeah, I don't know what he was doing. I mean, I go through there almost every day. I'm over in that general area, southwest of Tuckanuck and Muskeget. I fish south of the Vineyard, and I fish way down south of the Vineyard, down in the mud bottom there. And like I was just saying, the big boats, maybe some of the small state boats do. I've never seen one up north of the Hooter. You can't tow in there. It's impossible to tow. The bottom moves around, and there's deep holes. It's not flat bottom like you get south. So, I mean, I don't think the drag is towing south of there. I mean, if you rescind this, like these people are saying, it's not going to. The federal boats are still going to go right to that 3 mile line. They don't go north of it anyways. So, you can't tow there. And this fellow here, you can't tow north of that line.
You can't tow north of that line, though, with the shoulders there and everything else.
Yeah, the Hooter Buoy's there.
The few boats that do go up inside there, there's a few clam boats that go up inside there. They're not even trawlers, they're towing a clam dredge. There's no dragging whatsoever that's going on in that area. In state waters.
There's 30, 40 feet of water. Then you hit Muskeget Channel, it drops down to 100 feet in some areas. Once you get south of the Hooter, it drops down drastically. And west of the Hooter, west of Muskeget Channel, it goes from 15 feet of water almost straight down to 115 feet of water. Like he was saying, there might be a couple of clammers up in there, but there's nobody squidding on that. Looks like almost like a bum where that drop off is there, the funnel. So I don't think it's going to matter if guys don't get up and say.
Point to what he's talking about. The Hooter, please.
Yeah, the Hooter Buoy. The Hooter Buoy's right about there. And I've never
That's it.
seen anybody towing a net north of there. So,
Okay.
All
right, I want to thank everybody for the comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I
I'm
just had
sorry. Didn't see you.
Oh, no worries. I'm short. I'm Dr. Sarah Oktay. I'm the director for the UMass Boston Nantucket Field Station. And I just wanted to reiterate, I'm certainly a fan of rescinding this. I do think that the small mesh trawls are causing loss of forage fish. I didn't know if you guys had any data as far as bottom impacts. I think that the essential fish habitat question could be a very real one, and part of it's we need to really have some more data on what's existing in these sandy areas. I know there's some DMF data for isopods and amphipods, different invertebrates. Do you guys have data for how that changes after a dragger goes by?
Well, not for this particular area, but, we've been looking at those sorts of changes, impacts in many parts of not just state waters, but federal areas that are under consideration for habitat protection. But, essential fish habitat as defined by MSA is very specific, a very specific definition. I don't think this would make it to that definition, the federal definition. That doesn't, I'm not saying it's not essential fish habitat.
I know what you're saying.
It's probably fragile and important, productive areas. Most areas are. So the type of information we have varies from area to area. I think we probably do have some good information about shellfish in these areas. Some of the eelgrass beds have been well documented. Those types of things we probably know a lot about.
And those are very precious in this area, certainly.
Yeah,
to the east of that channel, Muskeget
and we
Channel.
we understand and appreciate all that. And, go ahead, but you're.
Oh, I was going
it's
to say,
your
I've got
turn.
some bathymetry information I'm getting with Mark Borelli over on the east side of the island and in the harbor with some high-resolution side-scan sonar. He's just now contracted. We haven't gotten all the way around on the south side, but even with these sand ridges, he can see a lot of changes in those sand ridges, and they do form a type of habitat, but a lot of those invertebrates also act as forage creatures for fish and for the squid themselves, and for so that's something a lot of people forget about. They think of everything above the benthos layer, and they just see the fish using the top of that. But there's a lot of things that live in there that draggers do impact, even for short-term periods of time. So I just wanted to say I think that's an important part of the puzzle.
Right. Well, again, I appreciate all this comment, and I certainly recognize the concern that's been raised here on the island, and you're challenging us in terms of making our decision. So we do have one more public hearing. The public comment period remains open until January 23rd, which I think is next Friday, for write-in comments, and I encourage you to continue to do that. Again, the way the process works is I'll make a final recommendation to our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission. It's a 9-member citizens board, and they'll consider that and either approve my recommendation or not. You'll be well aware of the outcome of this. I'm sure you'll be following along. That commission meeting will probably take place
February 12th in the Metro Boston area.
right. Although those are always public meetings, they're not public hearings, which means that, anyone who attends as a member of the public, may not be recognized to speak or provide information. This is your opportunity to do so, and the public comment period is. Is your hand up, Andrew? Let me take, this gentleman wants to say something, then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
How many boats are legally permitted to fish in that state? How many licenses?
If there were absolutely no restrictions, how many?
About 200 coastal active permit holders, all the way from Gloucester.
Yeah, so statewide, but that's not relevant to who might actually go in there. We've had up to 10 active vessels. Last comment on this, Andrew. Then we'll start striped bass, which are probably less controversial.
All right, thank you. Just after a few more people that spoke after me were talking, it sounds like perhaps a lot of the people in this room, maybe not everybody, doesn't want to see the few boats that are legally in there being stopped from going in there. I know some people still want that stopped, but it sounded like more of what the fear is of the federal boats going in and fishing inside the state waters that aren't permitted to do so and are doing so illegally. So just think maybe if there's some support, rather than rescinding the regulations that allows the handful, which like you said, at the most you've seen is 10 boats, tops, fishing in these waters legally, as opposed maybe if you could maybe just put a few more spot patrols out or be able to look at boat tracks data before you rescinded these regulations to see what is going on with the federal fleet. Maybe send a patrol boat out once in a while, a little bit more often, because I do fish back there, and there is very little enforcement back there. Once in a very great while, you do see something. So if you could maybe pledge a little bit more time to the enforcement back there, I think a lot of these people's concerns would be lowered to actually see that, it's the federal fleet back there that they're seeing, not the state fleet. And if you could get access, to the boat tracks data, which I know at least enforcement has pretty good access. Maybe your office doesn't, but Massachusetts Environmental Police do have pretty good boat tracks access. And, maybe even if they could just go online and just see what those federal boats are doing, to see if they're staying outside or going inside, and maybe do some spot checks.
Okay.
That might help rather than rescinding the regulation.
I can assure you all that I'm going to take my time and make a very considered recommendation to our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission. It might not even take place at the February meeting. We have until June 9th of 2015 to make the right decision, and I want to make sure I do that. So you know, we'll take everything into consideration, so.
All right, well, thank you for allowing me to speak, I appreciate it.
All right. The absolute last thing on this, I'm sorry. The coastal access permit, you want to know how many, that's what we were referring to, there's about 200.
The rest of the room probably doesn't.
Okay,
Bill knows, and Andrew obviously knows. If you don't have a coastal access permit, you can't come inside of state waters.
right, but there's a few hundred of those that we issue.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
And, you know, in Andrew's defense, you got a coastal access permit, allow the small boats, not these monster factory trawlers, allow the small boats that have been coming inside for years. You know, I'm all for banning the big, you know, the big factory trawlers outside of 3 miles.
Right.
I don't see, the little boat's not gonna do much damage.
Right.
You know, and it's all goes on coastal access. If you got a coastal access, you're allowed to fish in state waters, the
Yeah.
sound boats. If you don't, maybe that's a way to, you know, I know you guys, it
Okay.
used to be like that.
I-
All I would like to say, I talked to Jason David down in the Atlantic. He's in charge, he has all the data about the observer coverage. His comment, not only recently, but before when we discussed this whole thing, there's very little to no observer coverage. And as far as, and it's all about the bycatch. It's all about the bycatch. I don't give a whatever. We've witnessed it in all the herring fisheries, any small mesh fishery. If you have a huge amount of forage food going through there, you're gonna have whatever's in the area. Striped bass, bluefish, you're gonna have the fluke, sea bass stuff. That's, I mean, we're doing this, I think we're all on the same area. We're trying to make this a better place, good stewards of the ocean. And if you're gonna continually beat that place up and dump over bycatch, I mean, it's all about, that's a big,
Yeah.
huge issue.
I appreciate,
Anybody that says it's clean, just look at the history.
as I said, I'll take my time and try to make the best decision I could. So with that, I'll just ask, does the Board of Selectmen members have anything else they'd like to offer, given that, okay, and Representative Madden, I don't know if you're still here or not, but are you okay? Okay, thank you, Representative. So with that, I think I'd like to take a 60, 120-second break, give anybody an opportunity who doesn't want to stay for the rest of the meeting to leave. Thank you very much.